Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishna Yishkalim, Parak Aleph, Chapter 1, Mishna Zayin, Mishna 7. Ha-shekel al yedei ani. If you give the shekel, or half shekel rather, like I said before, the Mishnah always refers to the half shekel as a shekel. Ha-shekel al yedei ani, one who gives the shekel per person, va'yedei shchenoi, for his neighbor, va'yedei bin irai, or for someone from the same city as he is from, pater. That person is exempt from the kalbain, from the extra fee to make up for any possible amount of silver missing from the coin. If you're doing it for someone else, and then you're exempt. The imhil v'machayev, but if you lent it to them, you're obligated. That means like this: if I'm giving, let's say there's this needy person, so I'm going to give the half shekel for him. If I give the half shekel for him, not expecting any payment back, meaning it's originally a gift for him, I'm giving on behalf of him, and it's a gift to him, then there is no obligation for the kalbain. There is no obligation to pay that extra fee. Why? Because the rule is that the only time I pay a kalbain is if I am giving something I'm obligated to give. I'm not obligated to give for you. I'm voluntarily giving for you. That kind of giving of a shekel, there is no obligation of kalbain. There's no obligation with the extra fee. However, if let's say when you give the half shekel, it's with the understanding that he's going to pay you back, so you're just laying out the money for that person, so then it's considered like that person is giving the shekel, which means it's considered the giving of a shekel. It's an obligatory giving of the shekel. You're lending him the money, laying out the money for him, but it's his giving. It's not a gift for him. You're not gifting it. You're just laying it out for him. That's considered his giving. That means, and that's an obligation for him to give. So therefore, even though you're doing it for him, since you're doing it as his representative, so to speak, in the sense that, he actually more than representative, in the sense that, again, I'm not gifting this to him. He's got to pay me back. So it's like he's giving it. I'm just doing it for him. That's considered an obligatory form of giving. So kalbain has to be given. Now, you happen to be the one giving it, so you got to give the kalbain too. And guess what? When he pays you back, he's got to pay you back the half shekel plus the kalbain. Because this is all part of what you are doing as if he's doing it. He'd have to give the kalbain. You're just doing it for him. So good. You got to give the kalbain, because if there's an obligatory giving of the shekel, the extra fee has to be given. So fine. You're doing it for him, and he's going to have to pay you back the shekel and the extra amount. So that's what it means. The imhil v'mchayev, if you lent it to them, meaning if you did it with the understanding that they're going to pay you back, then you're obligated to give the kalbain, just like he would have to do it. Now, next case talking about the following. You've got brothers. They inherited money from their father. And when sons inherit money from their father, there's like two stages. There's a stage before they divide up the estate, which before that happens, they can use the money, they can use it, but it's considered like it's still the father's money. Until they divide it up, we see it as if it's the father's money that they're using. That's something important to bear in mind for what we're about to learn. Another thing that we have to bear in mind is there's a mitzvah called Maser Behema, when we tithe the animals. Every year, the new animals that are born from cows, sheep, goats, you have to take a tenth. You have to take a tenth of them, meaning every 10 of them, you have to now take it as a sacrifice in the Beis Hamikdash. They used to put them in a corral, right, and have them come out one at a time. And when number 10 came by, you gave it a tap with a marking. It's the 10th. It has to be now brought as a sacrifice in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, Mishna says like this: Here's a rule: brothers who are partners in the estate of their father, who would be chayev to give the kalbain, the extra fee, Patur Ma'aser Behema, are exempt from having to give the 10th of the animals. Explain that in a second. And when they're obligated in tithing the animals, Paturim min kalbain, they are then exempt from the extra fee. That means like this. When we start up saying brothers who are partners, brothers can be partners in the estate of their father in two ways. Either, as I said, before they divide up, they're like partners, but they're not really partners. They're just in possession of their father's money. Then you have brothers who divided up the estate. Each one took their own, and they decided, let's make a partnership. So everybody divided up the estate, but they decided to put it back together, so to speak, to put it back together as a partnership. So in that case, where they are partners like anybody else, who take their money and who become partners in whatever monetary thing they're becoming partners in. And let's say now, so these brothers now are partners like regular business partners, and now from the money of their partnership, they're giving a half shekel, okay, or they're giving a full shekel, let's say, together from it. At the end of the day, each one has his own obligation to pay a half shekel, to give the half shekel. Each one is doing so, and therefore, each one has to give a kalban has to be given. A kalban has to be given, even though the money that they're using for their half shekel is from the partnership. But so what is from the partnership? Each one is giving to fulfill his obligation, his personal obligation, and therefore you got to add a kalban. But that means we are looking at them as regular partners. If two brothers are in any case where the two brothers are regular partners, they will be exempt from having to tithe the animals. That means, let's say they inherit animals from their father. They divide it up, and they put it back together as a partnership. And they're partners in all the animals. There is a verse that teaches us if the animals are owned in a partnership, there's no obligation to give the 10th animal. No obligation. Torah exempts. Only the animals that you alone own, there's no partnership in them. That's when we say count 10, and every 10th has to be brought as a sacrifice. But if these animals are owned in a partnership, then there's no obligation to have to go ahead and take and separate that 10th animal and bring it as a carbon in the base of mikdash forever. And therefore so that's the first part of the Mishnah. The brothers who are partners that will be obligated to give a kalban, because they're just regular partners. After they divided the estate, they became partners like any other business partners. And therefore, even though the money comes out of the partnership, the half shekels come out of the partnership, you got to give a kalban, because why not? There's no reason not to. Each person on their own, they may be partners, but each person is fulfilling their personal obligation. They got to pay a kalban. If that's what's happening, then there's no meiser behema in this kind of situation. There's no tithing of the animals because they're partners. Now, but let's say when they're obligated when the brothers are obligated in meiser behema, which would mean what? Which would mean they inherited a bunch of animals from the father. They didn't divide it up. So we still considered their father's money. So if that's the way it stays, they're obligated in meiser behema. The new animals that are born from that estate for that year, you have to take every 10th animal has to be sacrificed as a carbon, as a sacrifice. That's the mitzvah of tithing the animals. But that's because we don't see them as partners. They're just holding on to their father's money. It's the father's money. It's the father's money. There's no partnership here. You got to tithe the animals. Well, if we're saying here that it's the father's money, right, because they didn't divide it, so now let's get back to the case where there's an estate, the father left over money, and now they didn't divide it up yet. And now from that estate, they're paying they want to pay the half shekel. They're paying the half shekel. So in that situation, we say there's no obligation to give a kalban. You know why? Because since it's the father's money that's being used to fulfill their obligation, then it's like the father is laying out the money, like the father is doing is giving the shekel for them, and no one's paying back anybody anything here. So it's considered like the father is giving the money for them. It's like the case where I go in and I give a half shekel for somebody else and I don't expect payment back. In that situation, we just learned there's no obligation of kalban, the obligation to add the extra fee. So anytime we say that you have to give the meiser, you don't. I would say anytime. In this case, of brothers that are together in money. Anytime we say that you have to. Anytime we say you have to give meiser of the animals, the tithe of the animals, you don't got to give a kalban. Anytime you got to give a kalbain, because it's a regular partnership, there's an obligation to tithe the animals. Now, the Mishnah concludes, V'kamahu kalbain. All right, after all said and done, how much is this kalbain? How much is this fee? Ma'ah kesef, the Rebbe Meir. The words of Rebbe Meir are, he says, a ma'ah kesef. It's a coin, it's a silver coin called a ma'ah. It's the equivalent of 1/12 of a shekel. A shekel, we're talking about here, the partner says a selah. A selah is the full shekel. So a ma'ah is 1/12 of a shekel. That's how much. It's a coin. There's such a coin. Ma'is is a coin mentioned many times, and that coin is 1/12 of a shekel, of a full shekel. The Chachamim say chatzi. Chachamim say you give a half a ma'ah, not a full ma'ah, a half a ma'ah. Half a ma'ah is 1/24 of a full shekel. That is the opinion of the Chachamim how much this kalbin is, and the Bartanura says Allah is like the Chachamim. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
This kalbun was